What's up, builders? This is Raise the Bar Radio, where we talk about building wealth, raising capital, and all in all, raising the bar in your business and your life. This is the No BS podcast for capital raisers, investors, and entrepreneurs who are serious about scaling their business and living life on their own terms. I'm Seth Bradley, securities attorney, real estate investor, and entrepreneur, bringing you world-class strategies from the best in the game. If you're ready to raise more capital, close bigger deals, build a better you, and create true financial freedom, you're in the right place. Let's go. Adam, what's going on, brother? Welcome to the show.
Hey, Seth. Thanks for having me, man. I'm excited about our conversation today.
Yeah, dude. Super stoked to have you on today. This is going to be an awesome show, man. Let's dive right in. Tell us a little bit about yourself, your background. Take it back as far as you want to.
Yeah, well, for the last 15 years or so, almost 20 now, I guess, I've been making my living opening my mouth and just speaking on stages all across the country. Had the opportunity to do a couple of international gigs, which was a blast. And in the midst of all that, making my living as a professional speaker, I realized that if I was very similar to your audience, if I wasn't doing the deal, doing the gig, doing the engagement, I wasn't getting paid. And so a mentor of mine said, the goal is not to go to work and get paid. The goal is to go to work and get paid. And so I started figuring out that what I really wanted to do with the messaging that I was delivering was turn it into sort of a mediapreneurship, where I was a mediapreneur creating content, but then I get paid for the content over and over and over again. And that today looks like I've written a bunch of books. I've got a documentary that I produced that aired on CNBC. And now we're starting to get into more of a SaaS business, which I'm sure we'll talk about. That's the shred method. But what I do when people ask me, I tell them I love to educate people about new and different ways of building a bigger life, not a bigger lifestyle. And I would say you and I have that in common because I know you're doing that on the show.
Yeah, absolutely, man. I got to ask, how do you become a professional speaker? I bet a lot of people are thinking about that.
The origin story is kind of interesting because I was a clothier at the time in Denver, Colorado. And I was literally going out and meeting with high-level executives in their offices, selling them custom-made suits and shirts and sport coats and pants and whatnot. And it occurred to me in the middle of a meeting at one point, an appointment with one of my clients, that I didn't want to measure inseams for the rest of my life. And I'll keep it PG, but this guy was one of my favorite clients. He was irreverent and funny and wasn't afraid to spend money on clothes. But this particular day, he confided in me that he wasn't wearing any underwear. And I was just like, dude, JP, what? You knew I was coming here today. He's like, I know, I just forgot. I'm sorry. And I walked out and I went, I don't want to do this anymore. I just don't want to do this. And the company that I worked for is a fairly well-known clothier. But every day I would drive around in my car listening to motivational messages. They were on CDs at the time. I'm going to date myself. But I would listen to like Mark Victor Hansen and Jack Canfield and Les Brown and Zig Ziglar. I would listen to all these CDs in my car. And Mark Victor Hansen said on one of the CDs that public speaking is one of the most noble professions because you get to travel the world, you get to change people's lives, and you make a lot of money doing it. And I remember thinking, that's what I want to do. All three of those things rolled into one. And so I reached out to a buddy of mine and said, dude, I don't think I'm in the right job. I need to be doing something else. He said, what do you want to do? And I told him, and you know how the universe kind of works in mysterious ways. He goes, well, Anne, who used to work with us, she works for a company that's all they do is hire speakers. And so I sent in a tape, I auditioned, I got the gig, and I was a W-2 employee of theirs for about 2 years, and then realized that, I was being underpaid for the work I was doing, that I was actually probably one of the top 10% of speakers on the roster. And then I realized that, when you can make anywhere from $1,000 to $5,000 an hour doing that, it was a pretty good paying gig if you were out on your own. So I took the jump and have been doing it ever since.
Interesting, man. I didn't realize that you could have a W-2 as a speaker. I thought everybody that was speaking was the speakers that were getting paid. They were kind of doing it on their own. I didn't realize there was kind of there was a way to do it where there's a company that pays W-2 wages to speakers to speak at events.
Yeah, it's interesting. It is interesting because there are companies that will hire you as a speaker to go, and it may be sell their product or service, or in this case, I was working for a company that was a division of Monster.com, the job search company. And I was speaking to high school and college students all across the country, and I probably presented to like 200,000 people in 2 years' time. So it was just a great practice run and a great way to cut my teeth on a very difficult audience. Because I don't know if you've ever been around a freshman in high school or a sophomore in high school, but they're like the most apathetic human beings on the face of the earth. They don't want to be there. I could have lit myself on fire, and they'd been like, "Cool, what else you got?" And then when I realized that there were speakers like me that were out who basically just said, this is my topic, this is my specialty, if you will, and here's the rate. And the more they spoke, and we have a theory that the more you speak, the more you speak. So once you get out, you hang your own shingle and say, I'm a speaker in this topic, people begin to know you as that person. And then word gets around, and obviously you have to not suck on stage. That's part of it. But if you're great at keeping an audience's attention, and I really studied NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, to use the right words. I studied comedians to figure out what was funny and what wasn't. And it just worked over time. I had more and more bookings. And at the peak of my career, I was doing like 70 or 75 gigs a year. Wow.
That's incredible. Definitely didn't realize that was your background. I remember those folks coming to like the office and, selling suits and doing that sort of thing. So that's pretty interesting. I'm sure a lot of listeners out there are familiar with that process as well.
Yeah. It was.
All right. Well, let's jump right into. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
It was a great gig. I mean, I met all sorts of really phenomenal business people, and I think for me it was like confirmation that I had this desire to impact people. And my boss at one point, he was like, hey, these people love you. They want you to come around. They love the discussion and the conversation. They need to buy stuff from you. And there was a kind of a realization for me that I didn't necessarily want to have to sell. I wanted people to buy. And speaking makes it real easy to do that.
Yep. Makes sense. Let's jump right into it, man. Let's talk about the shred method. A lot of folks will find this very interesting. I know that I do. What is it? And let's just start there. What is it? Tell us a little bit about it.
Yeah, the shred method. First of all, thank you for asking. And it's for me, I don't say this lightly, but nothing has built more wealth for me and my family than following this model. And the reason for it is there are two great expenses that everyone has in life. And I'm sure all of your listeners, be they attorneys, doctors, other professionally degreed folks, if you're in a W-2 job, you know this to be true. The two greatest expenses we have in life are taxes and the interest expense on debt. Those are the two greatest expenses. And a gentleman that I had met years ago who helped me with tax situations, just a brilliant strategist. He said, Adam, if you focus on minimizing your tax liability, that will get you halfway there. And it's very easy to do. Buy real estate, have depreciable assets, make personal expenses, business expenses, et cetera, et cetera. But he said, if you can focus on minimizing the interest expense on debt, this is like a video game that you can't lose. And so when I learned about the shred method, and this is known by a variety of different terms. Some people call it an Australian mortgage. It's called velocity banking. We've taken those concepts and turbocharged them, almost like putting nitrous oxide in a gas tank, in terms of making it go faster. But the shred method is a unique tool and a way of reorienting your cash flow through your household so that it is being used to the most efficient use possible. And to kind of qualify that, Seth, if you were to leave your home in the morning to go to the grocery store, as an example, and you came back home, emptied the car out, knowing you had to go to the post office at like 4 p.m., would you leave your car idling in the driveway all day?
Nope.
No. And why wouldn't you?
Wasteful.
Yeah, wasteful. You'd burn gas, it'd be hard on the engine. It's just inefficient, right? And yet what most people do is they get their income gets deposited into a checking account, and it sits there for days, weeks, months, sometimes years on end. And we never really use it to its highest efficiency. Meanwhile, we might have debts, commercial debts, primary mortgages, might have student loans yet. And all of those are accruing amortized interest, right? And you might say it's compound interest working against you to a certain extent, but at the very least, amortized interest means that the majority of the interest you're paying on that debt is upfront. It's in the first 1 to 5 years. And so the shred method teaches people how to take that income that is being super inefficient in an account and instead begin to apply it through a process that allows you to blast away the highest interest or highest payment debts that you have, freeing up cash flow, building equity, and ultimately, and this is the key, creating liquidity to go buy passive income properties, if you will, or other passive income plays.
Interesting. Yeah, and we actually haven't had anyone on the show to speak about this method, whatever nomenclature you might use. So let's go in a little bit more detail. I mean, what is the vehicle? What is this flow of money that you're talking about?
Yep. So, logistically, here's how it works. Money typically would just get deposited into checking. You pay everything out of checking, your mortgage, your car loan, your credit cards, living expenses. And the gurus would tell you that anything extra should really go towards savings and investments, right? And for most people, it goes to Costco, Target, and dining out. That's where it goes. It doesn't stay in the account, doesn't go into savings. If it does, it goes there for a small period of time. I think that most people don't really have a savings account. They have a put and take account because they put a little bit in, take a little bit out, put a little bit in, take a lot out. So the way this works is the money, instead of being deposited straight to a checking account, gets deposited into what we call a shred account. And the shred account could either be a line of credit, or it could be just a side account of money that you have sitting there that has not been accessed in some time. And what we tell our users is that you really want to have either a line of credit or a shred account that is 1.5 to 2 times what your monthly net take home is. So if you're bringing home 10 grand a month net, then ideally you want either a line of credit or a shred account of 15 to 20 grand. And the magic of this is the money's going to flow into that account, but the shred method is powered by a piece of software that is based on an algorithm that's tracking your income, your expenses, the interest that you're paying on all your debts, and how much discretionary money you have available at any given point in time. And essentially, we're leveraging that in really short bursts of time against your largest debts, which could be, again, student loans, could be your mortgage, could be commercial properties. And in doing that, what we're doing is we're saving copious amounts of interest, like literally tens to hundreds of thousands of dollars. And in the process, we're freeing up a ton of equity. So people that are saying, hey, I'm living paycheck to paycheck, it's hard for me to figure out how am I going to invest more money, we're telling them the money's going to come from the equity that you're creating in your properties by paying them down rapidly.
I love that because, I can see where this is going to, potentially free up some extra cash to invest. A lot of folks out there, including myself back in the day, we got caught up in this thing we call the golden handcuffs, where we're just spending everything. Like you said, we're spending on Target, on eating out, on things that we really don't need. I mean, there's a time and place for spending money on having a good time and enjoying your life for sure. But we tend to overdo it. As our income grows, our expenses grow right along with it. And a lot of people that I talk to about investing, they're like, I don't have $50,000 to invest in this real estate deal or $100,000 to invest in this real estate deal. And it's like, well, why don't you? You make $300,000 a year. Why don't you have $50,000 to invest in this awesome deal,
right? Or
to put aside for your emergency fund? Like, why don't you have these things set up?
Totally.
So we always have to walk them through. The expenses is the issue. Really, it's what are you spending all this money on? And we try to find how they can save on those expenses so that they can invest in these assets that are really going to set them financially free.
No doubt. And I think you hit the nail on the head. If somebody's making, and honestly, I tell people, if you're making 6 figures plus, $100,000 plus, and you don't have 10, 20, $50,000 ready to go, there's something fundamentally wrong. And here it is, we're sending too much money to our banker and it just goes up in smoke, right? We like to refer to it as the interest to income ratio, which is if you take how much income you make and you back out how much of that income is actually going to pay interest expense, it'll probably blow your mind. If someone's got a multi six-figure home or mortgage that they're paying on, and they've got student loans, and maybe they're driving, a $50,000 to $100,000 vehicle with a payment attached to it, you're probably burning 50 to 60 grand a year in interest and not really thinking twice about it. So what this does is it starts to claw back some of the money that you're sending to your banker, which, by the way, they make plenty of money. They don't need your money. That is the most profitable business out there, is banking and lending. And I mean, literally, Seth, if you drive 2 miles around your property there, how many banks would you be able to stop at, do you think? Ballpark best guess.
Right. Half a dozen.
Easily, yeah. Right? And they're probably $10 million buildings minimum. Out there are even more, right? So, So this is the deal. They're profitable business ventures. And what we have to remember sometimes is we are their compound interest vehicle, right? Us making our payment every single month is what makes the banks all the money. And if we can game that system, if even for 12 to 18 months at the very beginning of our debt, we can strip away a huge chunk of the interest that we would normally be paying them over the course of a decade or more. And that's, to your audience, that's how I'd say this is how you find the extra 50 or 100 grand, because you do have it and it should be in the equity of your property and easily accessible, as a liquidity tool. It just isn't, because you haven't challenged the banking system.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Now, is this something you can set up yourself, or is this something that, you need an expert to kind of walk you through? I'm sure if, that you could probably do it either way. It's just like anything else. Do you want to take the shortcut or not? But yeah, I'd just like to know your thoughts on that.
You're exactly right. I mean, I could build a deck on my house if I wanted to and had 3 months to learn how to do it. Anybody can learn how to do this. My question to most people when they say, can I do this myself? I'll say, yes, why haven't you? And for that, the investment with us is very minimal, but if mainly what it is coaching and being able to help people get the logistics right. Because once they get it, it's very simple, but there requires a little bit of retraining the brain in terms of how to handle your money and where the cash flow goes, because it's like so ingrained in us to live in the banker's business model. Put money in checking, pay your bills, anything left over goes over here. And if you look at it critically, the two groups that are really making money using the existing platform are bankers and any advisors that are accepting your money and then turning around and doing something with it. A friend of mine used to call it the helper class. So when the helper class has your money, they're making a ton of money, probably more than you are. And that's our goal, is to begin to start to pull back some of the money from the helper class to keep it for ourselves to build those massive, passive, permanent streams of income.
Yeah, that makes sense. We tend to bash a few of those helper class folks. I mean, they're not all created equal, including some financial advisors and folks like that they're okay people, but their interests aren't necessarily aligned with yours.
That's right. And I would agree with that. I don't want to villainize them, but I think that personal finance is personal. And the challenge that I have with anyone out there who espouses a certain way, mine included, is it has to be for the right kind of audience, the right avatar. And so, from our perspective, the people that we help out are the ones who do want to break free from the W-2. They want to create massive, passive, permanent streams of income. Over time, they'd like to build a bigger life, not a bigger lifestyle. So if someone's, chronically overspending, got to have the newest of the new every single time, they may not be a perfect fit with our strategy, because the goal is to continually increase your income while either keeping your expenses similar or even trending down over time, which is not to say that you can't expand where you're spending. Your income is increasing exponentially relative to your expenses. And we do that through the model that we're teaching people. So, if you're a new car every 6 months or 12 months kind of person, may not be a perfect fit. But if you're somebody who's like, hey, the debt's kind of oppressive, I want to get rid of it, and I want to build, massive wealth for future generations, then generally speaking, we're a pretty good fit for those folks.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, and I feel like it's probably a math equation, right? Like we can't necessarily do it on this show because everybody's taking it in by audio for the most part.
Yep.
But there's got to be an algorithm, and you could probably set those expense numbers and interest numbers that you're paying on your mortgage and other debts, and what you're going to pay on that through the shred method, and kind of see the savings and how you can grow that wealth year over year.
You're exactly right. It is super fluid. So if your income changes, your expenses change, we plug all that data in and hit recalculate, and the thing automatically adjusts to whatever your expenses are. So one of the things that I would never fault anyone for is taking awesome vacations or buying a new car, whatever your choice is. Again, we're not going to villainize anyone for living their life. But what we can do through Shred is to say, hey, if you're going to drop 10 grand on a vacation, it's going to change your payoff by a month or 2 months or 6 months, depending on your income and discretionary income. And if someone knows that and they're planning on it, at least they're armed with that information, as opposed to, gosh, we shouldn't do this, but we did, or should we buy this $50,000 car? Does it make sense? Or 80 or 150 or whatever your number is. We can show you exactly do it, but just know this is what it changes in the process.
Yeah, I like that, because you can just show them this is the impact it's going to have on paper before they do it, and then you can make a better decision on whether or not you want to do that or not.
Absolutely. And furthermore, and you'll appreciate this, I know you're of this mindset, you'll get to a point where it's like, if you want the new car, then invest the money in a syndication or another property that puts enough money in your pocket, you can go pay for the car. But let your assets pay for your liabilities. And I think that's the main thing that that many people, I'm sure your listeners, certainly folks that we engage with, they don't have a lot of assets. They work hard, they make good money, but that is the sum total of their income, is active income. And our goal is to increase passive income over time, where it supersedes your expenses, because at that point you're financially free.
Right. What are some of the passive investments that you're involved in, or that you recommend to people once they've kind of implemented this system and they're trying to build those passive income streams?
Yeah. There are a number of them, and I keep getting introduced to more and more all the time, Seth. I mentioned that, that I was a mediapreneur, and that the goal was to do the work and then get paid. So I started looking for other passive income streams. I really do love real estate. I've been invested in real estate for a long time. We divested of personally held real estate about 4 or 5 years ago. And I think I was too early to the party, but I thought the market was peaking, and I thought I could get the max amount out of my properties. And I think I did at the time. And then we were introduced to syndications, and we started really appreciating the fact that you could own a piece of a 350 unit apartment complex in South Carolina or Houston, Texas, or some other growing city, and get a couple things, either monthly or quarterly income. You could get bonus depreciation. And you basically got a K1 at the end of the year, which allows you to claim some of those expenses. And so we love syndications. We try and stack syndications on top of each other. So they're coming due. They're selling every 3 or 4 or 5 years. So we'll put an amount of capital in, knowing that it's going to turn over in short order, and we'll have another amount of capital to put in. And generally speaking, that capital amount just keeps going up. So we love syndications. I've been introduced, and we haven't pulled the trigger yet, but on ATM tranches, where you can buy. Have you heard this investment?
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yep. So you can buy, an amount of ATM machines where you're getting basically compensated on whatever the fee revenue on those are. There are many advantages to those. There are some drawbacks to it, but it's, again, a passive income stream, and one that's fairly consistent. And then I really like intellectual property plays. So I will tend to invest in a business that has some IP, and it may not cash flow right away, but I know that in 2 or 3 years, the IP is probably going to be worth something. And so it's more of a long-term play for me. I'm not going to put as much in it, but we have a couple of $25,000 to $50,000 investments in those kinds of deals as well. So that, in addition to books and the documentary still selling and things like that, I'll keep doing. For me, the process of creating passive income is kind of a game. And so whatever the next thing is, I'm digging in, I want to learn it. And total sidebar, but I'm trying to teach my sons and my daughter, this is the way of the future. It's not about working a 9 to 5 and getting W-2 and staying with the company for 30 years. It just doesn't happen anymore. It's about setting up just perpetual income streams that allow you to live the way you want to live. And that, I think that answers your question, hopefully.
Pardon the interruption, but we don't do ads. Instead, know that if you're raising capital for real estate, my law firm, Raise Law, is here to give you the expert legal guidance you need to raise capital compliantly and structure and close your deal. And if you're looking for a done-for-you fund-to-fund solution, TribeVest is the industry's only all-in-one setup and fund administration solution. Visit raise.law and tribevest.com to learn more. Yeah, that's right. You're preaching to the choir here, man. That's awesome, and you're kind of pretty deep into it. A lot of people will invest in a syndication, and it is expensive to get involved, right? I mean, it's $50,000 or so or more to get into one of these things, and they're like, okay, I'm done. But you can't be done. You have to keep saving, keep investing, and you're in it to the point where passive investors start accumulating wealth because they start stacking. They start coming due every 2, 3, 4, 5 years. You put it back in another one, and they just compound on each other. And you're really accumulating this tax-free if you stack them correctly. So it is an incredible vehicle once you get going, and it does turn into a game. I mean, you can look at your bank account or look at your personal P&L and just see how it's growing over 5, 10 years. It's incredible, and you're not doing any work. You're vetting the sponsor, the market, and the deal, and really just the sponsor. Once you get really good at it. And you keep reinvesting with the same sponsors that you like, and there's no work involved, no tenants, toilets, and trash, none of that kind of stuff.
Yes. And I think you hit the nail on the head. When you find a sponsor you really like and you jive with, it's easy to roll the money over to them because they're constantly looking for the next deal. And their reputation, their personality, everything is based on their success. So they have a very, very vested interest to make you money. And so I don't think I fully realized when I was younger the power of having the ability to write a $50,000 or $100,000 check. And once you get there and you can do 50 or 100 or get to a point where you can write a $500,000 or $1 million check, things change drastically because there are syndicators out there that will take $1 million. They'll pay you $90,000 a year guaranteed on the investment. You'll get bonus depreciation and write-offs and all of that. And you'll have like a 200% return on it within 4 or 5 years, 3, 4, or 5 years. That's where you can buy a new car every year or 2 or 3, because you need like a $75,000 or $80,000 write-off, to your business. So you need a truck or you need a heavy vehicle, right?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, that's a good point. I mean, people that have $500,000, $1 million or more liquid, I mean, you can just look at it simple math and you get an 8 to 10% return on that in cash flow, just in cash flow. If you're living reasonably, you can live off of that.
Totally.
So you can be, you don't need $10 million, $20 million to retire off of this. If you invest in the right deals and kind of spread it across, diversify in different deals, different sponsors, different geographies, different asset types, you can be retired. If you want to. It's closer than people think.
I would agree. We have a theory that nearly everyone, and certainly your audience, could be free, done completely in 10 years or less.
Absolutely.
We call it a 10-year freedom plan. And the challenge, I think, Seth, and I would be curious your take on this, but I think the challenge for most people is not necessarily an income problem. It's a liquidity problem. So, you make good income, right? And we talked about it. It's the expenses that factors in. But where the majority of your investments go are probably in qualified funds. They're sitting in 401ks and Roth IRAs. Unless it's self-directed, you can't really access it till you're 59 and a half. And even then, it's 59 and a half to 70 and a half. You have free reign access. Otherwise, the government's regulating how much you take out without fees or penalties. That's a liquidity problem. And so the shred method takes that into account and starts to build pockets or buckets of liquidity that you can draw from. The first is your home equity, or it could be equity in a commercial property. And then the next would be building a bank of money that you're borrowing from at some point in time, just another bucket. And the more buckets of money that we create, the more liquidity you have and the more investments you can get into, thereby increasing your passive income. So to your point, you do this well, it's like a video game you can't lose over time.
Yeah, that's right. And we've been programmed to think if we have a high paying job, we just put as much as we can into a 401k and we're doing the right thing and we're doing everything that we need to do. And then everything that doesn't go into that 401k, we're spending. So we're not saving anything else. We're not keeping anything else liquid. And we're just assuming that we're going to be okay because we put this money in the 401k. Well, like you said, you can't access it until you're 60 years old.
That's right.
Unless you take it out with a major penalty. So, one way to do that obviously is to roll it over into an SDIRA or self-directed, or I'm sorry, 401k.
Yep.
That's self-directed, something that you have some control over, and then it does become liquid in the sense that you can at least invest it in things that you want to invest in rather than a financial advisor or just stocks, bonds, and mutual funds.
Yep.
And then, as you said, there's different ways that you can free up liquidity, a HELOC, something like that, borrow against a life insurance policy. We've talked about infinite banking policies, things like that. There's creative ways to do it. You just need to be aware of it. Most people just aren't aware of how to do that.
Yeah, I think that's what's so valuable about your show too, man, is that we only know what we know. And there's an enormous amount that we don't know. So when I got introduced to syndications and I got introduced to the ATM tranches, and I'm looking at these going, there is risk. There's risk in everything, but the risk is so mitigated, and you don't realize that if you're writing $100,000 check and they're saying, yeah, we're going to pay you 9% guaranteed. And these are some syndicators will promise, an interest rate based on what class of investor you are, A, B, C, D, whatever it may be. But when I looked at that and I go, if I'm striving to get 8 to 10% in the S&P 500 and I have zero control over that, where would I rather be placing my money? That was something I didn't know. And it's always fascinating to me to begin sharing this with people, because when I share the shred method, a lot of folks go, "Not too good to be true." This, if it's so good, why isn't everybody doing it? And what I'll tell them is because of human behavior and because the bank's lobbies and their marketing engine's so powerful. But it's not magic, it's math. We're taking mathematical principles, risk-based principles, and applying it to real estate or finance and figuring out how to make an amount of money that will supersede what your W-2 job is. Pretty simple.
That's right.
Yeah.
Pretty simple. It's math. Just got to get it down on paper, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, let's switch gears a little bit. I want to quickly get into, this concept that you preach about building a bigger life at work, because I think that's, inspiring and that sort of thing, and really life in general, right?
Yep.
Tell us about that concept and kind of dive in a little bit.
Yeah. It actually started from a conversation I had with a recent college graduate, and they had gotten an advanced degree. They were going into a high paying job. And I think they'd been in it for maybe 9 months or so. And we were having coffee, and this person said to me, "I'm just not satisfied." And I said, "Well, what is it you're not satisfied with?" And they said, "Well, the issue is that I thought at this point in time after graduating, he'd be traveling the globe. That was what he had always romanticized, was just tons of travel and doing whatever he wanted to do." And I said, "Well, what's keeping you from that?" And he goes, "Well, I just got into this long-term lease apartment." I go, "Okay." And he said, "And I bought a bunch of furniture that I financed." And then it's like, "Okay." He goes, "Well, I have a couple of gym memberships, not one, two gym memberships, each probably 80 to 120 bucks a piece a month. Had a car payment because he needed a fancy car." And I said, "Dude, it sounds to me like you're building a bigger lifestyle, not a bigger life. And what you're asking for is a bigger life." And that became almost a deep dive search for me on what would building a bigger life mean for me and my family. And what I did, Seth, was I started digging into what are my core values? How can I live according to those core values, not according to my neighbor's core values, who may be drastically different than mine. And I ended up writing a book called the Build a Bigger Life Manifesto, which breaks down how do you do this step by step. And there are 10 core tenets. And the first one is you got to build on a strong values foundation, like understanding what is it truly you value in life. And if you're doing more of that, then your life should be fulfilling. And mine are family, freedom, love, growth, and connection. And if I'm fulfilling those 5 buckets on a weekly basis, generally speaking, I'm really fulfilled. And so the second is have a bigger vision. And a bigger vision for your life might mean I'm not going to stay in this job for the next 20 years and hopefully make partner. And then hopefully, because we all know that as you get promoted in a W-2 job, it doesn't mean you work less. It means you work more. And so my bigger vision was I want to make my vocation my vacation. I'm going to speak, but I'm going to speak in cool places that I can take my family to. People are going to pay me really well to do it. And I'm going to do it X number of times a year. And then I started asking, and this is the third step, asking bigger questions. And bigger questions look like, okay, so if I wanted to do that, how would I get better at speaking? How would I get so good that people will pay me 10 or 15 or 20 grand to go do what I do for an hour? What would that look like? I started asking not how would I pay my house off early? How would I pay my house off by the end of this year? And when I asked that question, answers started coming and we were able to do it. So this is kind of the layout of how we walk people through this process. And for me, a bigger life today is just that, I live for my family. I want to travel with them. I want to have tons of fun with them while they're still in the house. I have 2 teenagers and 1 in college. And soon, eventually they'll be gone and it'll be my wife and I going and living the life that we most want. Our lifestyle right now is pretty locked in. We have a beautiful home. We drive nice cars, but everything's paid for. And at this point, the goal is just to continually create massive, passive, permanent streams of income that afford us the ability to be generous, to live the life we want, and ultimately for me to be able to go share that message with other people.
And something so simple that you did there. It's just ask yourself what's important. A lot of us don't take the time to think about why we're upset, why are we not happy, and a lot of it comes down to not filling those buckets that are important to us on a regular basis. And to be able to figure that out, you've got to take a few moments to think deeply about what it is that's important to you.
100%. And I'll give you a great example, Seth. One guy that we worked with, he realized that one of his core values that was not being fulfilled was adventure. So he loved his job and he goes, I don't know what it is. I'm just dissatisfied. And we went through the values assessment and adventure was on there. And I go, well, where are you getting adventure? And he said, that's the problem. I haven't had an adventure in 2 years. I said, so maybe in building your life, we need to figure out where are you carving out adventure for yourself or your family to make sure that you're doing it. For him, community was a big part of it. And he was getting some of that in his day-to-day client interactions. But what he really wanted was to build a community of friends that would go do stuff together. And I said, that's on you, man. If you really want that as part of your life, you got to build whatever that looks like. And what if you combine that and adventure? So you get a whole group of adventure seekers that get together 3 times a year to go skiing in Aspen or, go skydiving on a weekend or whatever it is. What would that look like to do that? And he lit up and, I could do this right now. So to your point, I think we're all very, very close to having a fulfilled life and building a bigger life. But you do have to take time to figure out what does that look like for you.
For sure. And, a lot of the folks listening are attorneys and doctors, and they tend to have high suicide rates, all these crazy things, substance abuse. Yeah. And people from the outside looking in think, why? Because you're making all this money, you have this high profession that everybody looks up to, and you're not unhappy. And that's why, because those folks, folks like us, we're just really focused on just that occupation.
Yep.
And that's it. And we don't focus on some of the other things that would fulfill us and make us happy. And, tons of attorneys I talk to try to they're like, how do I start investing as quickly as possible, make as much money as quickly as possible so I can get out of this job because I hate being an attorney or I hate being a dentist or whatever it is. But really that might not be the issue. The issue is that you're not filling up those buckets outside of your career. And if you were to start filling those buckets, start paying more attention to those things, you might not be as unhappy in your career. And you might actually find that you enjoy what you're doing because you're good at it. You worked really hard to get there and you're making a good bit of money doing it.
No doubt. I would add to that I think the majority of professions that you just listed, dentists, doctors, lawyers, etc., what they really want is they want to maintain professional status, do what they do. They've gone to school, they've learned how to do it. But over time, they want to work less and less, not more and more. And if you're doing what you recommend on the show, and if you're leveraging something like the shred method to create it, you can get to a point where half or more of your income, ideally all of it, is replaced by passive income. But it requires that you get really focused on working for the right reasons and not filling in the lack of fulfillment or unhappiness with a new car or the next doodad or spending a fortune on something. Instead, decide, hey, I'm going to go get into an investment this year that will begin the process of creating passive income for me to start building the life that I truly want. And it's pretty transformational once you figure out how to do it and what the next steps are.
Yeah, it's like the Matrix. I mean, you start kind of, as soon as you start, it becomes a game, how you said it earlier in the show, and you just start seeing things that you didn't see before. You start being presented with new types of investments and businesses that you can invest in that you never saw before, but they were right under your nose. It does turn into a fun game, a money game.
Yeah, no question. I was at a conference not too long ago and they were calling me Morpheus because I made a reference to the red pill or the blue pill. And they were like, dude, you're Morpheus. I just took the red pill. I'm going down the rabbit hole. So beware, are you ready to take the red pill?
Love that. All right, Adam, before we jump into the Freedom 4, what's one last golden nugget for our listeners?
A golden nugget for your listeners is that money today is abstract. It's not a concrete thing. Several decades ago, you would be given cash or you'd pay for things in cash. And today, virtually everything is a cashless transaction. And when we're not using cash, it doesn't feel real, right? If we're using Apple Pay or we're swiping our card or tapping our card, it doesn't feel real. In fact, there's no pain sensor that triggers when you do that. The opposite is true on Amazon. When you hit one-click ship for $47, a pleasure sensor actually is activated because you're in anticipation of that thing coming to you. So we also have to realize that the more money you make, it feels like, well, the more you have to spend. But because money doesn't feel real, you're spending way more than you think you are because of the abstract nature of it. So some of that is like reining back in and understanding these are real dollars that you're putting on a card or swiping on your phone or whatever it may be, and deciding, is this the best intentional use of this money, or could I be using it to build the life that I truly want? And I will add to that, Seth, that it's very short. There's a short amount of time that it requires you to function just a little bit differently in order to get there, where all the passive income covers your wants. So just like intentionality for the next 12 to 24 months will make a massive difference in your life.
Yeah, that's all it takes. All right, let's jump into the Freedom 4. What's the best thing you do to keep your mind and body healthy?
I am part of an exercise group called F3, and it stands for Fitness, Fellowship, and Faith. There's like 75,000 guys all over the world that do this every morning. And we get up, rain, sun, sleet, or hail. We were working out in like 8-degree Fahrenheit weather this winter outside. It's always outside. And I love it. I do it 4 or 5, sometimes 6 mornings a week. But for me, just getting up, the first hour of my day will dictate what the rest of my day does. And so my F3 brothers and I, that's the right way for me to get started.
Awesome. With all your success, what is one limiting belief that you've crushed along the way, and how did you get past it?
This is going to sound a bit like an oxymoron statement, but a limiting belief is that, oh man, there's so much opportunity. And for me, I'm a bright, shiny object guy. For years, my wife was like, just pick one opportunity, please. Just pick one. And so for me, it's the fact that there is so much I can do limits me, because you can really get very, very good at one thing. But I'm a big fan of James Clear and the book Atomic Habits. And he'll say that it's hard to get traction when your focus is divided. And so I've been really intentional about zeroing in on my focus and knowing that this is what I'm setting out to do. And it may be for 12 months or 24 months or 5 years. And I'll reevaluate along the way. But I've got one thing and I'm really focused on that. So that's been a limiting belief I've had to get over.
Awesome. What's one actionable step our listeners can do right now to start creating more freedom?
Well, go to theshredmethod.com, not to do a self-plug, but it is. Go watch the masterclass, see what we do and how we do it. If you are, already intrigued by this and are wondering like, what should I do with a HELOC, or should I have a HELOC? My answer to everyone is everyone should have a HELOC. Everyone. If you have equity in your home, why do you not have a line of credit? If for nothing else, to have that as an emergency of some kind. So point blank, the first thing you ought to do is go access a line of credit, be it a home equity line, a personal line of credit, a PLOC, or a BLOC, a business line of credit. You could also do a cash value line of credit. But I think you got to have one of those, because when you understand this method, this process, that's a linchpin to making this work.
Great. How has passive income made your life better?
I like to call it mailbox money. And man, I love mailbox money. When it shows up, I celebrate. And I've had a mantra for years that I'm a money magnet, that money comes easily and frequently, that I get more checks in the mail than I do bills. And I just repeat those mantras over and over again. So every time I set up another form of passive income, man, it's just like a win that you feel deep down inside. And it doesn't matter, Seth, if it's $50 or $15 or $5 or 5,000, right? Total sidebar, real quick story, but I was sitting with a buddy of mine at a conference and he kept showing me his phone, and he was clearly showing off, but every time he'd pop up his phone, it was like another sale was made, and it'd be like $27, $170, $300. And I go, dude, how are you doing this? And he said, I set up these funnels, and it's just a little digital product I created, and we're doing ads and we're putting all the people towards these ads. And I said, so how many of those do you get a month? He goes, I don't know, somewhere between $9,000 and $10,000 a month is coming in. And I remember feeling giddy for him and giddy about the idea that this could be possible, that you could just do whatever you want to do every day, go fishing, go surfing, be on a sailboat somewhere, and pull up your phone and be like, well, this is cool. I just made $800, So for me, we have started to build that into what we're doing. I now get alerts on my Apple Watch. It's a Slack bot. So every time a sale is made, it pops up. And we went to Mexico over spring break, and the vendors on the Mexican beaches, they bless themselves every time they make a sale. And so now when a sale pops up on my Slack bot, I'm like, all right, I made a sale. This is awesome. So how has it changed my life? I'm more grateful. I sleep well at night. I have peace of mind. And I know that, future generations are going to be taken care of by the wealth that my wife and I are creating.
I love it, man. All right, Adam, this has been incredible. Where can our listeners find out more about you?
Well, you can find out more about me personally at adamcarroll.info. It's 2 R's, 2 L's. adamcarroll.info. And if you want to check out the Shred Method, we have lots of free resources. So you can go and do a ton of research. We have a savings analysis there that you can plug in your numbers and see how much you could save and how quickly you could be out of debt. All of that is available at theshredmethod.com.
All right, brother. Appreciate your time. Thanks again for coming on the show, and we'll have to have you on again soon.
I'd love it, Seth. Keep doing what you do, man. This is super important stuff.
All right, brother. Talk soon.
Thanks for tuning in to Raise the Bar Radio. If you enjoyed today's episode, make sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Keep pushing, keep building, and keep raising the bar. Until next time, enjoy the journey.